Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals, and mums, Kirsty and Catherine.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. This week, we are talking about confidence, following on from self-belief. And Catherine, I know this one is close to your heart.
Yes, it really is. I think so. I started to call it quite early on the confidence conundrum, because I think it's one of those sort of enigmas. It sort of like gained this slightly elusive quality. You know, everyone talks about wanting to have confidence, don't they? Certainly in my experience, talking to people. And sometimes I think we say it because we kind of assume it's something that will fix other things. So I think it's a really commonly wanted thing for people to have more of. But I think we say it without really thinking about what do we mean by it? How do we get more of it? And is that even possible?
Absolutely. It's kind of a magic wand, isn't it? You know, if only I had the confidence to do that, when I'm more confident, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that might be, well, in my experience, I think that's a little bit of the problem. We think of it as this sort of enabler for other things to be as a result. So it's, I want this thing so I can then have something else. So it's to enable you to be, do, and have other things. So, and it's exactly like you just said, it's things like, oh, if I felt more confident, I'd apply for that role or that promotion. And so it almost gets, it's a bit of a get out of jail free card, you know, like, oh, if I was more confident, but unfortunately I'm not. So I won't perhaps do
excuse, doesn't it? We can hide behind it. It's the little padlock on our comfort zone.
Exactly that. Things like, you know, when I'm confident, I'll wear a swimsuit in public and not care what people think. or we make assumptions about what confident people have or experience or what they're like. So confident people have lots of followers. Confident people can talk on a big stage, or they have more opportunities. It's like a sort of qualifier on the outcomes that we want. So we think we'll gain more of it and it will lead us to something else. And I think that's a bit of a sticky wicket, because it means we're looking to a future state, you know, as in, so once I've got it, then I'll have these things. So you've somehow attained this confidence. And then it's the things that you actually want to have or be or do now. So you end up caught in a bit of an awkward catch-22, because we want that confidence now to facilitate what we're currently doing. So it's like chicken and egg type situation.
Yeah, isn't it just? Yeah. So you're not, because you haven't got the confidence, you're not doing the things that might actually help you to build the confidence that you want.
Yeah.
And do you think also that we've talked about being confident and having confidence, and you said about, you know, we've got these ideas about confident people. And I know I certainly used to have this view where it's okay for them. They are confident, not they have confidence, not that they've worked on building confidence, but they are confident. Like it's an innate quality that you have or you don't. And I've certainly come to see that as not what it is. As you're just saying, it's something we can build, isn't it?
I totally agree. I think it's like so many things that we discuss. There isn't really a sort of on-off switch. As we spoke about before with confidence, how it's different to self-belief, or certainly how we've determined it is that the confidence is kind of in a certain context. If you think of those examples we just gave, they were confident for a promotion, confident in how we look in what we're wearing, that they apply to different situations. But the thing is, we can't just expect, and I think people know this really, but it's funny because our actions don't necessarily back this up. If we're waiting for confidence to just materialize, how is it going to do that? That's asking something rather unfair, I think. Do you agree?
It's the magic wand thing, isn't it? We're just waiting for the fairy godmother to turn up and go, poof, there you go. Confidence. Knock yourself out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's I looked into it. It was one of my very first blogs, actually, was about confidence. Didn't know this at the time. It stems from the Latin word fidere, I'm saying that properly, which means to trust oneself, which was interesting because we've spoken about trusting oneself in the context of self-belief. But I think we can apply this to trust yourself to do the thing, that the situation, context. So it can mean things like a sense you can achieve what you set out to do. So there you go, there's the context. Or I really love this quote, and I'm afraid I cannot remember where I found this, but I think it's such a beautiful expression. The purity of action produced by a mind free of doubt. Is that a great way to talk about confidence? Because it's talking about the action to do the thing when you're not full of doubt of how it's going to work out. Or in a very simple way, we can say it's about certainty in a choice or action you take. So I think we can still maintain that slight separation between confidence and self-belief that we spoke a bit about before, where, with self-belief being that kind of foundational, a trust in who you are and that you'll be okay no matter what the situation in hand is. Whereas confidence is about, if you think of those words, achieve, choice, action's mentioned a couple of times. It's to do very much with that situational context. And I think confidence grows through experience, the learning, the failing on the way, and mastery. And I don't say mastery in that kind of become an absolute master in something, as we've spoken about before. We don't believe in perfection, but mastery in that sense of it's no longer new, terrifying, or unknown, all those things. And I think we go back to one of our favourite examples, Kirsty, is about being a confident driver, because
we keep going back to driving, don't we?
I think it's a really good example, because you can be full of self-belief that you will learn how to do it, but chances are you're probably not a confident driver straight away, right? Lesson one is probably likely you might get one of the pedals mixed up and stall or hit a curb. Not talking from personal experience there at all.
Or get your directions confused and go the opposite way to the way you're told. That didn't happen to me either, not at all.
No. We share the same sense of direction, don't we?
Yeah. Apparently I indicated the right way, I just turned a different way.
Oh, okay. That's possibly slightly more problematic.
Didn't go well. Moving on.
Yes. But the point is it's about achieving that future desired state, isn't it? Of being able to be independent, to drive, to get in the car, to not be taking lessons, doing all those things. We've had to have what I think is much more important first, and that's courage to take action and experience the process of learning to drive, that you're not going to be great at it straight away. You have to go through this experience of learning and mastery to get to that confident state.
Yeah, that's where the self-belief kicks in, isn't it? That at the start you go, okay, this might go horribly wrong, this could be awful, but I can cope with that. I trust myself to cope with however this goes. And that's what enables you to get in that car and turn the key in the ignition, if modern driving cars have keys and ignitions. I still have an old-fashioned key and ignition car. But so when you've got that trust in yourself to cope, even if you don't do well, and I think that's one of the key differences with confidence. When you use the word mastery, I think there was a definition we looked at, the difference between the two in the episode on self-belief, and the word successfully came up. Confidence has a lot to do with actually knowing that you can do something and actually do it reasonably well. And that, exactly as you just said, all that, it's the learning and the doing that gets you to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely difficult, I think, to get to that state of being confident in something, because if it's untested, I think you can have that self-belief behind it. And I think it still takes a huge amount of courage, and it doesn't feel comfortable, right? So to be able to say to yourself, I know that this might go wrong, but I'll still be okay. I think that's still an unbelievably brave thing to be able to accept and to be comfortable with, because, we don't like to get things wrong or to mess up. But if we can accept that that's part of the over the hump kind of thing of where we want to get to, otherwise we stay on this side. And that's why I think we have that problem with, if we wait for confidence, you're waiting for something that can't just appear of its own accord.
Unless you happen to have that fairy godmother. And if you do, I would like to be adopted by her, please.
We'd be incredibly rich if we could just bestow it on people, wouldn't we? I think, because this is the irony, as coaches, we spend, I don't feel the same, Kirsty, but I think confidence comes up a lot with clients. They want to feel it, and I totally understand. We all want to feel it because we think it unlocks what we want the other side. My view is that it's kind of like a byproduct. It's not actually the thing to get fixated on. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's my second. We're doing quite well this episode. For me, and that's why I describe myself as a self-belief nurturer, it's the self-belief that is the key thing. When you can believe in your capacity to handle whatever comes at you, then you can work on building the confidence. But if you don't believe that, it's almost impossible to start developing confidence in anything.
Yeah, I love that. And you just made me think of another point, actually, which I'm sure we'll cover in another episode, about comparisons. Because I think if you focus on self-belief, I think that helps remove the need for comparisons, because the focus is there on you. It's in the word self-belief. But with confidence, I said right at the start, we think, confident people X, Y, Z. You make a comparison of yourself versus what you might perceive to be a confident person. And we can assume things about people's level of confidence, can't we? But there isn't any kind of flashing beacon. We can only judge what outward behavior we see. Like, we might see someone who say they strut onto a stage to give a speech. We might think, wow, they are brimming with confidence. But for all we know, they've done that strut to make themselves get out there, because inside they are like a big pile of jelly. We don't know these things, do we? We don't really know what people are thinking or feeling when it comes to confidence. So I think it can be a bit of a gauge it's tricky. And it's, as I kind of said before, I almost think it's not quite the right thing to focus on, because, it isn't swagger, it's not cockiness, and it's not bravado. I think those are actually very, very different things, and that can actually be misplaced confidence, which I think is perhaps even worse than a lack of confidence. I think it's people who don't seem to have any kind of, luckily, I don't think I really know any people like this, but when there's no kind of filter on their levels of perhaps competence or what they should feel confident in.
Donald Trump could be an example.
Yes. So, without delving into the world of politics, because I think that we could go off on a whole, probably an hour talking about something like this. But yeah, when you see and hear people they seem to have such conviction and confidence in what they're saying, and you think, what are you actually saying? You're making no sense.
What are you on?
Yes,
but
exactly.
you also want a bit of it, don't you? There's a part of me that sees somebody like, let's hope there's nobody like Trump. You see Donald Trump, insert name of your person here, and you go, what the actual fuck? What is this person on? And there's a little bit of you that goes, I wish I had some of that. There's almost that sense of envy that they clearly don't experience that doubt, and how liberating must that be?
Yes, I do see exactly what you're saying. I really do. And I think you hit on something. Bit of that is exactly the right thing, because if you're all that, I think you just have no radar on reality. that's the truth. Whereas I think the people who are often perhaps crippled by more self-doubt are much more competent than they realize. So it's that balance. But yeah, I do wonder what it would be like. Can you imagine a day in the life? Does he just think he's the most amazing person in the world and everyone else is a sucker? It would be
Either
kind
he
of
does, or
fascinating, wouldn't it?
either he thinks that, or he's actually secretly incredibly insecure. And I don't know which version I would prefer, to be honest. But
I
I think
think
there's
both.
something here around that. Something that's just come up for me is what you said before about confidence being a very situational thing. It's about being able to do something specific. That's, I keep going back to the Donald Trump example, but we just said about somebody who has that confidence in themselves for everything, it appears. Whereas we've been talking about confidence as something you develop in terms of specific behaviors or situations or activities. And again, I find it far more relatable in that sense, that situational aspect of it. That's where you feel you can work on it and build it. I think far more than saying, I am going to become a confident person. Well, really? How? How do you become a confident person? But can I learn to be confident in my ability to do certain things? That feels very different.
Yes. Yeah, it does. You're right, though. We were talking about someone in very general terms. I think, to be fair, we came across quite an extreme example that we latched onto, but because I don't think, think of all the people that you know in this world, chances are they don't have quite the same philosophy, makeup and expression as that particular example. And I think that's probably a good thing.
They're mostly less orange, yes.
Yes, less orange.
Anyway,
But
moving on.
this is an interesting thought, actually, because I did do some reading around this topic quite some time ago about this idea of confidence, because as I said earlier, I do think it has this slightly elusive status because it's hard to pinpoint what it is. And I think for us, we've determined it applies in certain situations. And the question that I came across was, are we born with confidence or can we acquire it? And the answer to that is actually a bit of yes to both of those things. So it is interesting that actually our confidence is shaped by a lot of things that are in our lives. So, for example, our genetics, schooling, upbringing, society, even how we look, all of these things affect our confidence. But it's not a done deal, which I think is a real blessing to read, because truthfully, as women, we do tend to have to work that little bit harder in the confidence stakes. I know that's a bit of a generalization, but I think it is a generalization with some legs. And it's not in isolation. There isn't like a confidence vacuum that you access, because other factors come into play, right? We have imposter syndrome, probably another favorite topic that will come up another time, and perfectionism, which of course we spoke about right at the very start. We have other elements sort of interconnecting, so we don't have confidence in this kind of vacuum, but we can become more confident. And I think the secret to it, if there is any such thing as a secret to it, is to not be focusing on it as the outcome. Kind of, as I said before, it's kind of like the byproduct of focusing on some other things. Does that kind of make sense to you? Do you agree, or do you have a different view?
No, I agree very much with that, because I have to confess, confidence is not something I find it easy to relate to. I've never felt that I was confident. I am, and I grew up as a shy, quiet, bookish introvert, and constantly being told you should be more confident, you should put yourself forward more, speak up. And that all felt impossible, and I didn't understand how to be more confident. I didn't understand what it was, how you got it, why I apparently was different to so many other people in that respect. And I've now sort of reached the point of it being, I can't actually imagine what it must feel like to be a confident person? Again, we're talking about that more general sense of confidence. But I am getting the idea that confidence in something. And the more you look back on through your upbringing, that you realize that there are little areas where you did have confidence, where you may have been taught up, or other people clearly had some kind of admiration, whatever, for a certain thing you did or could do, or they praised it. And you got good marks at school for something, whatever. That there would be an aspect of confidence somewhere that came out along the way. But yeah, it's not. I mean, I wonder though, are we all born with perhaps the same level? What genetic confidence? It's an interesting idea. Just when they say, no baby is born not expressing its needs. Every baby cries when it wants milk and when it wants affection and to be, to feel safe. But, fast forward 20 years and people's reactions when they want to feel safe are all going to be very, very different. They all started at the same point. So what, is confidence like that? Do you think?
Yeah. It is a tricky term. And you know what was so interesting when you were saying about your own experience, what was so interesting, you said it was so hard to relate to this idea of being told, well, you should be more confident.
Yeah.
Because what does that mean, and what does that look like? If it was a case of, and this is really interesting, in my house I've got an experience I can relate to this week. My daughter has her school play coming on for the end of year soon. So year 6 gets to do a little leavers performance. And she's decided that she wants to go for one of the bigger parts. And I love that, because I don't think that would have been me when I was at her age. But she came home yesterday saying that they did like a little, not quite audition, but they had some lines to read, and then they had to express a preference for what kind of part. And she said that she was brave and she put up her hand for a bigger part. So we find out later on this week what she's going to get. But I just love this idea that she's applying it to what she hopes that the outcome will be, is that she'll do a part where she gets to have some lines and have a bit of presence on stage. But she'll only feel, I think, more confident in that once she's perhaps practiced the lines and all of those things. But she's had the courage, which brings me on quite nicely to that word, which I think is so important. And I'm not underestimating that this is something you can just tune into, but I think it is a definite precursor to confidence, and that is courage. It was the first blog I ever wrote, was courage comes before confidence. Even though they don't alphabetically, courage does come before confidence.
Let's rewrite the dictionary.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And the confidence is that sort of byproduct of having the courage to act. So instead of looking for the confidence, you try something new, you build that skill, you put yourself forward, as my daughter has just done, and then the confidence comes as the consequence later.
Absolutely. And I think there's something there as well about the support you get in doing that, because some children probably wouldn't do that if they felt that, their parents would then be disappointed or annoyed with them if they didn't get the part. That might hold them back if they expected an uncomfortable reaction if they didn't succeed. Whereas if you know that you've got loving support that will support, too much support going on here, you've got that loving support that's going to cushion you through that. It's not going to sort of tell you that you're wonderful and everybody else is stupid, but it's just going to be kind and caring when things don't go right. That makes it so much easier to find that courage, knowing you've got that safety net.
Yeah.
So,
and it ties back very nicely. Thank you. It talks about something you said very nicely about self-belief. I like that she's got the self-belief that it might be tricky. She'd have to learn the things, but she just wants to give it a go. And I love the fact that desire has slightly outweighed the fear part that she was potentially feeling about, it could be tricky, and what if I don't learn it easily, all of those things. But it's been outweighed by that kind of desire to see what's on the other side. And I think that's what it's like when you're learning to drive. I mean, God, I remember thinking, God, I can't wait for the time I'm not having lessons and I can actually drive by myself. But you have to go through the process, don't you, to get there? Which leads nicely on to one of the other things I think we have to focus on, and that is competence, not perfection, competence, because I think we get caught up in not being perfect. Obviously, we have quite strong views that perfect it doesn't exist, so we don't need to get too consumed about that.
Absolutely.
But we do need to give ourselves recognition for our competence as well. And, outward displays of what we think might be confidence is actually quite different to maybe like a quiet determination to keep going, to do the best job that you can. And you don't have to have that swagger or the loudest voice in the room to have your confidence develop through that belief in your competency, the things that you are capable of, that you can do. And it's a bit of a shame because it's kind of a hindsight thing, isn't it? Realizing what you are capable of, you realize it after the event.
Yes, you don't always recognize what you're achieving, or that you might have done it better or easier than others, and you're so busy feeling inadequate or scared or whatever it is that you don't see that until later. And that is probably a huge barrier to building confidence. Back to comparing yourself. When you're making that comparison to others, you don't see what you are actually doing well.
Yeah. And I think the other two things, so we've mentioned courage, we've mentioned competence. These two are sort of a C with a self in front. So we've got some self-compassion and self-criticism. I think these are other things that can facilitate or hinder how we can develop our confidence. So obviously our self-compassion can cushion the blow of failure, but it still supports this idea of, well, I gave it my best shot. And I think this comes into that sort of self-belief camp that we've spoken about before, rather than I won't even try because I may not achieve that thing at the other side. Whereas, our self-criticism, that's where we berate ourselves for not being better. But if we can try and dial that one down and dial up the compassion and cut ourselves a bit more slack, I think we actually will give ourselves much more opportunity to demonstrate that courage without it feeling like such a hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, the compassion side of it, whether it from yourself, because we can be very bad at doing that, and from being around the right people as well, the people who will, like we just said, around children can be scared to try something if they feel they're going to face parental criticism in the event of failing. Yeah, that applies to grown-ups too. If we're surrounded by people who are going to mock us or, be unkind about us not doing as well as we'd hoped to do, then we're probably going to be less likely to try it. So if you can be kind to yourself, and if you can find your tribe of people who will support you, but the criticism can be necessary, can't it? Criticism is perhaps the wrong word. Feedback might be a better word. To be able to feed back to yourself what you could have done differently, what you've learned from it not going in the way that maybe you wanted it to go. And if you've got people who will do that for you as well, who will be, constructively honest as well as kind, then that all helps you move forward.
Yeah.
But so often you get into that cycle of, oh, I'm just useless. I don't know why I even bothered, and I was always going to fail. I always cock it up. That cycle is so unhelpful. And you wouldn't talk to anybody else like that.
No, we're so much harder on ourselves than on other people generally, aren't we?
Yeah. So if you catch yourself doing it, just think, would I say this to somebody else? And if you wouldn't, what gives you the right to say it to yourself? Would you say it to the 5-year-old version of yourself? No, you wouldn't.
No, so true. So true. So I've got a question for you, Kirsty, actually, because I know you've got a view on this, and this is something I sway kind of both ways on that. So I'll just come what it is. The fake it till you make it school of thought. And is that an effective way of building confidence? So I'd love to hear what you've got to say on this, because I know it will help my own thinking around this.
I don't really subscribe to that. I have put a lot of effort into it. I've done a lot of faking it and very little making it, frankly. I mean, one example, in my old corporate life, I had to do presentations, speak to the department, whatever. Very much not my favourite thing to do. Bit ironic considering where I'm sat now, but this is just having a chat. It's just you and me. It's fine.
No one else here.
But standing up on your hind legs in front of a group of people and talking, very much not my thing. I can't remember a time I did it when I wasn't sweaty palmed and shaking, when I didn't lose sleep the couple of days beforehand. And as time went on, I did get better at it. I actually got some good feedback and so on, but it never felt any easier. So I could go out there, I could put on the show, and people thought they're doing okay. And when I told them that I was sweating and shaking, they're going, really? But you seem so confident at it. I was fucking terrified. And it never got any better. And it has got better probably in the last couple of years. Sort of networking for my own business and stuff, and having to stand up in front of people and talk about what I do. It's still not my favorite thing to do, but I realized quite recently I feel differently about it. I think that's because I've done a lot of work on understanding my own fears and on building my sense of self-belief. And that has shifted. I still don't believe I speak well. I still don't believe I'm going to stand up there and do a good job. But I do trust myself to cope with how it goes. And I do think I'm doing okay, mostly, except when the words dry up in the middle of talking, which happened this morning. That was a bit embarrassing. So yeah, I was faking it, but I never felt that I made it. And it's much the same with driving. Go back to driving. Same with driving. I am not a confident driver. I have more confidence than I used to. I get it's a spectrum. But again, I tried so hard to act the confident driver and to mimic the people that seemed like confident drivers in my driving style and my approach to it. It just didn't take. I didn't get there. Maybe it got me out there, got me doing it a bit more, but it's more about that giving it a go and trusting yourself to cope with what happens and giving yourself a chance to get a bit better at it. That happens, but I don't think that pretending you're okay about it makes you okay about it. No.
I think it's one of those catchy phrases that just it trips off the tongue kind of thing. So, and people like things they can remember easily. And there's just something that's a little bit uncomfortable in the fake it till you make. I mean, just because it rhymes and it's nice and catchy.
Sounds good.
It doesn't totally sit comfortably with me. The reason I was a little bit on the fence is because I think if the alternative is to perhaps not do it at all, whatever it might be, and it's something that you either perhaps want to do deep down or maybe you need to do as part of your job. So public speaking is a really good example. I actually had a client who had to give presentations as part of her job, so it was kind of unavoidable. But it's one of these things that you don't perhaps naturally feel confident about doing. I suppose there's something in that about if it takes that kind of I'll fake it till I make it to make myself just get up there and give it a try, maybe that it's worth having that mantra in mind if it works for you. But I don't think it does have to. And that's why I think it comes back to what I think is more important, which were those other words we mentioned earlier, the courage, the compassion, letting go a bit of self-criticism, and recognizing the competence that comes. And I think I do appreciate none of these things are easy, yes, I think faking it till you make it has quite sort of decisive connotations to it, because making it makes it sound like it's sort of like a done, like nailed it type thing, and it may not be that. It may just be, I can get through this, which is, I think what you shared was your experience. But conversely, maybe what happened as a result of going through that is your self-belief became a bit strong, because you thought, I don't love this, but I trust myself enough to get through it, sweaty palms and all. Maybe that was more how it worked.
Definitely. I think that's an excellent point. Yeah, it helped me grow my self-belief, and that matters. And maybe there's something here too about, it's okay if you're not confident. We put a huge emphasis on it. I mean, we are a society that tends to favour sort of that confident, extroverted, go-getting mentality. But you don't have to be like that. I mean, I have listened to sort of TED Talks or whatever, where the speaker has got up and started by confessing that they're absolutely terrified. You don't have to play the confidence card every time. So maybe rather than, I think when I felt I had to fake it and pretend it was all okay, I was criticizing myself more for the fact that I was having to fake it than if I'd just gone, you know what? I'm not at all confident about it. I'm going to go out and do it anyway, but I'm not confident. And that's okay. Let's just get on with the thing and focus on the thing and stop worrying about the fact that I'm not confident.
Yeah. Love that. Let's share some of our favorite, as we like to do, some of our favorite quotes on our confidence. So I actually have one of my own. So mine is, don't wait for confidence to come. Have the courage to take action now. The confidence will come later.
Yeah, there's one that always comes up for me, which in various forms is attributed to Henry Ford. And it doesn't directly mention confidence, but it's, whether you believe you can do a thing or not, you are right. And I think that's quite a nice summing up of what confidence boils down to.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? Because it's got the belief in it. It is about a certain thing. So yeah, I can see it's absolutely relevant to our subject of confidence this week. I also like this one. This is Arthur Ashe. It says, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I love that. Really simple. Nothing, there's no kind of sort of, that kind of, you should be doing this, or any of that kind of mentality to it. It's just, it's very sort of simple. And I think it encourages people to take the next step, I think. And my absolute favorite, I found this one just recently, and I think you'll love this one, Kirsty. Marvin Phillips, the difference between try and triumph is a little oomph.
That's brilliant.
I think that's just genius. I know we talked about catchphrases catching on maybe for the wrong reasons, but this one I just really like that, because I think that emphasizes that little bit of courage taking you over the line. So I just thought, isn't that a great quote?
That is brilliant. And the Arthur Ashe quote, what that brought up for me was acceptance. There's a huge amount of acceptance there. This is where you are. This is what you've got. Do what you can. Rather than that, if only there was just that or the other, when I've got this and the other. It's just acceptance. This is where you are. To go a bit Yoda, do or do not.
Yeah, love that. So let's end with our question for everybody listening on the topic, confidence. And obviously we will answer as well ourselves, although I think we both have a very similar view on our answer for this one. And it's to think of something you're confident doing, and then to think around it a little bit more. Like, has it always been this way? Chances are it wasn't. And why is that? And what changed? And can you apply all of that thinking around it to something in your life that you'd like to feel more confident at now? And I think, as you and I both have realized, that we feel a lot more confident now talking to people about what we do as life coaches. But certainly for me, it wasn't always this way. It was like, and I think you share a similar thinking around this is that for me, it was like a new identity, like a piece of clothing to put on. Not a superhero cape quite, but you know what I mean? It was like putting on a new identity, and I wasn't used to wearing it. I had a very recognizable former employed role. You know, people have an understanding of what an HR manager is, even if it's a slightly wrong understanding, at least they can grasp it. Whereas life coach feels like a big question mark for a lot of people. And I didn't feel confident, I guess, in adopting that identity and explaining it to people. Or I think perhaps people might wonder, well, why has she gone from this, which I do understand, to this, which I don't? But the thing is, I've realised it's not for them to understand that. It's for me to understand that and to feel that comfort, and then have all those other things I mentioned, the courage to say it, to feel competent in what I do as a coach. And that has all grown over time. So I realized it has made a lot of sense that the confidence wasn't there straight away. But I think my self-belief is actually now more secure. I've got more experience in what I'm doing. And I do know the value of coaching. And I really wish everyone knew that and experienced it too, because one of my favorite phrases about coaching, it's not to explain, it's to experience. That's what I think is the best way for someone to comprehend coaching. And I really wish most people would give it a try to actually really understand what it's about. But anyway, that's a slight digression. But yeah, it's a process. It's not a sprint, certainly in my experience anyway. I've always said I'm something of a sloth, you know, in The Hare and the Tortoise, there's the sloth at the back, that's me. But I think I can apply that to other areas and know that it will come. And I think you share very similar thoughts on this.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we are the same person, it's official.
Yes.
Yeah, I can so relate to all of that. And yeah, that identity piece. I mean, when I first started trying to show up on social media as a coach, I would only ever use the business page I'd created. And I was terrified about sort of people I knew personally on my personal profile, sort of following that or seeing it. And because it just felt like such a different version of me, and that I didn't know quite how to join up the two kinds of identities. What would people think, and would they get it? Would they understand it? Would they think I could do it? You know, the comparisons and that whole idea that you have to just emerge fully formed and be able to do it perfectly was crippling. So yeah, I did not feel confident identifying as a coach, showing up as a coach online, and that's pretty problematic when you were trying to build a business and earn a living doing something.
Yeah.
And it's not ironic. It's a perfect example that the coaching that I've had, the work I've done on myself, has been absolutely key to developing the confidence to stand up, whether it's one-to-one, whether it's the people I know, whether it's strangers, whether it's in a room full of other people, to actually talk about what I do with courage and with conviction, to be kind to myself if I don't do very well, and to keep a lid on the criticism. That, you know, the coaching allows you to dig into what's going on, what's driving all that, and what's stopping you from moving past it, and what the benefits are to you doing that. We talked before about a lack of confidence is like, you know, what allows you to stay in your comfort zone. And I think that's so true. When I'm like, you know, saying like your daughter, her desire for that part, for that bigger part, is allowing her to push through that sense of, got to go through this bit. When you want something, when it matters to you, you're prepared to dig a bit deeper and to do what it takes.
Yeah.
And once you've done that on something that is important to you, perhaps it becomes easier to recognize it and apply it in other areas of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think applying it to the most important areas is definitely where to start, right? Because otherwise we're not living in a way that is true to what we really want and what we're capable of and what we could actually achieve. So I think we can say that we're not downplaying confidence by any means. I just think there's a way of looking at it, which is almost like you don't look at it directly. It's the thing that's to the to the side, if you know what I mean. And I hope we've helped explain that in a way that people can relate to. And I hope that answering the question about something that you feel confident doing, because sometimes we don't give ourselves recognition for those things, right? So if we're asking people to actually focus on that and then think around it, they might realize they can translate some of that to other areas, as we have done. Like, we have realized we haven't necessarily felt confident in certain areas, and yet it has grown and it has developed. And who knows, we might even say we're confident podcasters in give us another, maybe year or whatever it might be, who knows. But it could just feel a bit more natural, but we're having the courage to do it and hopefully growing our confidence in doing it as well.
Yeah. I mean, when you first talked about a podcast, my reaction was, no, I couldn't possibly do that. But taking that, when I thought about what was involved and started to like the idea of doing it, the confidence started to build a little.
Yeah. We're also sharing it, which I think also is a good thing, isn't it? It helps keep us accountable.
Yeah.
But also it feels like we're sharing the load as well. It's not like all on one set of shoulders, it's on two. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. It's been lovely to talk, as ever, with you, Kirsty, about all things confidence. And we will see you all again soon for another episode.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.